Good morning, Year 12. Happy Friday, and welcome to another lesson on Blake and his poetry in his collection Songs of Innocence and Experience. Just to shout out after your assessments, thank you for those. We should be making sure that the titles of poems, the title of the collection, Blake's name, the Industrial Revolution, all of them should have capital letters, and the titles of the text should also be within punctuation. Please just make sure we're not making those errors over and over again, because it does tend to chip away at me having to type that same target every time. Anyway, onwards and upwards. Today we are going to look at The Little Black Boy. Now this is on page 72. This is within the Innocence collection. Now this is the only poem that deals overtly with issues of race. Okay? We will of course come to this in just a moment. For now, here is your starter on the board. I do in a second want you to pause this video. You are 100% going to write down these quotations. Okay, they are all things that Blake was quoted in saying, so they are absolute gold in terms of author's intention and in terms of, your context for assessment objective 3. So when you do write them down, I want you to leave a couple of lines beneath each, or if you want to transform each of them into a mini mind map, go ahead and do so, whatever floats your boat. But for each one, I want you to have a little go at figuring out, at inferring what Blake's attitude to human life is, to the human mind, to our world, our existence. Okay, so you would write them down, and then underneath each just make a little bullet point. What is he saying about what it means to be human? Okay, about our lives. Now if you're stuck, I've got a little search help bar at the bottom, and I've popped down some of the adjectives I placed on our Instagram a couple of weeks ago to describe Blake. So rebel, outsider, progressive, romantic with a capital R, of course, revolutionary, iconoclast, which means like a reformer, a forward thinker, someone different that goes against the grain, and he is of course anti-establishment. So let me just help you with one. That bottom one, the glory of Christianity is to conquer by forgiveness. Now just remember Blake's views on religion. Okay, now of course we know, we've said it a lot, that he had some really subversive views on institutionalized religion. He felt, of course, that institutionalized Christianity was actually an oppressive force, one of the twin mills of oppression in late 18th century, early 19th century society, his contemporary world. But he was still religious, of course, in his own way. He believed in God. But what he felt was the natural Christian principle of our lives, of the human existence, was actually forgiveness. He felt benevolence and forgiveness were at the heart of true Christianity, not fallen Christianity, not the experienced version, the institutionalized version of Christianity. So I might pop in my bullet point there, I might use one of my words there in the, as Blake was an anti-establishment thinker, he believed quite progressively that Christianity was not about sort of binding principles of thou shalt not, but was instead about benevolence and forgiveness as at the heart of the human experience. Now I've just thought of that off the top of my head. Hopefully that made sense. You might want to go back in the video and just listen to what I said one more time. If you want to pop that down as your bullet point, there's one on me for free. But the others you must look at yourself. Okay, give you some little hints. The top one, think about Marxist ideas of sort of a capitalistic system, of this system of the mind-forged manacles, and how Blake wants to escape that. I think the imagination one's pretty clear. We know how he felt about the creative imagination. And then the one on the left-hand side, it's a bit tricky. Think about the idea of the unknown. Things that are known and things that are unknown, and then in between there are doors. Doors are things that you can walk through into other worlds. Okay, think about spirituality there. Think about being a romantic. Think about the possibilities that exist in what we can appreciate between, in that kind of balanced state. Think about the contraries. Known, unknown, two completely opposites. What did he want? Balance, yeah, things like that. Okay, so pause the video now, give yourself 10 minutes. I've waffled on for far too long. Use the help box, use what I've told you, write the quotes down. Here we go. Okay, welcome back. Let's get to it. We're on page 72, of course, The Little Black Boy. I really like these illustrations that I located. I edited this from a former pupil's presentation. Because I just really like those images that were being used here. So we have the vision of the mother and the child, the little black boy, the little character of this eponymous poem. And if you look on the right-hand side one, you have the tree, which seems to represent sort of godliness, this connection to the heavens. And you have God sort of in equal placement with the white and the black child, and we've got the lambs around his feet. Okay, so remember, this is a song of innocence, so we know already that it's going to be full of idealism, of sort of these unattainable visions of equality and of creative imagination and of liberty. Okay, in no way, shape or form were white and black individuals in an even position on the social hierarchy in Blake's contemporary world. Okay, in fact, there were so many contemporary views around at his time on race and slavery, where individuals still believed that non-whites were inherently inferior. Okay, and they felt that they were inherently, like innately, like born less than white people, and that somehow justified slavery, they felt in their mind. Okay, they are biologically sort of innate inferior, and thus there is a justification for the form of slavery that took place. Okay, so of course Blake rallied against these ideas. It wasn't necessarily at the forefront of the war that he was waging on society, but it was certainly something he considered as an extension of society's oppression. Okay, so again, really ahead of his game here in thinking not just about class and the oppressions found there, but also race. Let's get into it. I want to read it first and then we'll have a talk about what it's about. So follow along with me, please. My mother bore me in the southern wild, and I am black, but oh, my soul is white. White as an angel is the English child, but I am black, as if bereaved of light. My mother taught me underneath a tree, and sitting down before the heat of day, she took me on her lap and kissed me, and pointing to the east began to say, "Look on the rising sun. There God does live, and gives his light, and gives his heat away. And flowers, and trees, and beasts, and men receive comfort in morning joy in the noonday. And we are put on earth a little space, that we may learn to bear the beams of love. And these black bodies, and this sunburnt face, is but a cloud, and like a shady grove, for where our souls have learned the heat to bear, the cloud will vanish. We shall hear his voice saying, 'Come out from the grove, my love and care, and round my golden tent like lambs rejoice.' Thus did my mother say, and kissed me, and thus I say to this little English boy, when I from black and he from white cloud free, and round the tent of God like lambs we joy. I'll shade him from the heat till he can bear to enjoy upon our Father's knee. And then I'll stand and stroke his silver hair and be like him, and he will then love me." Okay, wow, that is so much naivety, so much ignorance within this poetic voice, which is of course the little black boy, the eponymous character of this poem. Now this child carries so many of the traditional qualities that we associate with the poems in the innocence section. Okay, he has a limited perspective. He is unfortunately blinkered, okay, to society's true inequalities. And it even seems, year 12, that his mother encourages that blinkeredness, okay, that naivety, because she claims, of course, that once we die, once our cloud vanishes, okay, it's a euphemism for the body, dying, we will enter heaven, of course, and we shall hear his voice, and like lambs rejoice. And the idea that, he will be able to sit round God's golden tent in equal position to the white boy is just ludicrous for Blake's contemporary world, okay? Because black individuals were not thought to be on an even place within the hierarchy of society. I've said that at the start of this lesson. But what is it about? So in this poem, this is the only one that Blake is dealing head on with this contemporary, so of his time, socially accepted evil. Now, what is the socially accepted evil? It is racism. It is the former ideals of slavery that were upheld by many, okay? By many a white supremacist. So this is the only poem, and you want to be writing these notes around your poem in your anthology as well, that he is directly head-on dealing with this contemporary socially accepted evil, okay, the justified slavery of black people. But of course, he's also showing how blinkeredness and living in innocence alone, like the child, okay, will only reinforce your oppression, okay, will just keep that wheel turning, because you are not gaining the consciousness, the awareness of the evil abuse and exploitation that you are facing and that you will face. Okay, the mother is a prime example of that. She is accountable here as well, because she paints this euphemistic, idealistic image of entrance into heaven and of equality for her child, who will no doubt go on to face malevolent injustice and racism in his life. Okay, so two issues here in this poem dealing with the contemporary views of race and slavery that was very much justified, apparently so, right, in Blake's world, and also reinforcing that idea that inaction and innocence really can't be your only way of looking at the world, because innocence is a limited perspective. So quite literally though, all that's happening is this African child is comparing his appearance, his outward appearance, with the white child's. And even though he claims that I am black, and he says that with a very clear, matter-of-fact declarative, right? That's his reality. He claims that his soul is white, okay? So what he's doing there, you can see this in two ways. Number one, he knows, despite his outward appearance, that society tells him that he is inferior. He understands that inside, internally, he has a white soul. Okay, I think that's because he's been told for so long that white is the standard. Yeah, white is the thing to be. It is the cultural, racial standard. And so he feels like, I know that my outward exterior is black, and I acknowledge my shortcoming in that area, but inside I'm white. So he adopts the white as the standard, right, for purity and for holiness, which he has to aspire towards, right, because society tells him so. That's what he has to aspire towards, okay? So what he's doing here in this poem is recounting his mother's teaching. She taught him to think of heaven as this benevolent, kind sphere, that God is this benevolent leader. She says, you know what? In heaven you'll find that love. It's just in life you'll have to bear the beams of love, right? The sunbeams, okay? You'll have to be sunburnt, okay, to suffer in life. And so in heaven, when your body has disappeared, the cloud, then you'll be granted that access, okay? Like an innocent lamb to rejoice. This is no good. This is another wider criticism of Christianity, okay, like Holy Thursday, like the little vagabond, okay, because it is absolutely no good, okay, to withstand such abuse in life, and then to have this insubstantial argument that, you know what, in death, we will find God's love. So the child is being taught, year 12, not to protest. That's what's happening here. Okay, the child is being taught not to be subversive, not to protest, and this is really a derogatory lesson to learn. So at the end of the poem, once he's had his little lesson from his mum, he turns to address the white boy. Okay, this might be later on, after remembering what his mother said, and he has this very innocent acceptance of the status quo, where he acknowledges his inferiority before the white boy, and he basically says, you know what, I'll shield you from the harsh beams of God's love until you can bear them, and when you're ready, then we can sit at God's knee together. So he is almost this self-sacrificial figure, because he realizes that whiteness is the standard and he must become like the white boy in order to be loved by him. So it's really sad, to be honest. It's really upsetting when you think about how enthusiastically the little black boy takes to protecting the white child, when the little black boy is most acutely the victim here. Okay, so much information there. I know, year 12, this is quite a complex poem. You might want to take a moment, go get a cup of tea or some water, stretch your back out, take a moment, and come back to this in a second if you need to. Okay, what is the big idea then? If I was going to sum this up, I've already said so many times this is the only poem that explicitly deals with race. Okay, I've summed it up on this slide. I probably won't read it all out. I've already mentioned it before, but if you want to write this down, it's nice and clear. Blake is stressing how really equal the boys are by extension, right? Because they are both innocent. Okay, they both share God's love ultimately, but it's society that undermines this equality. It's humanity that creates the hierarchy, right? It's humanity that undermines the natural equality of children. When children are born, like Jean-Jacques Rousseau believes, they are blank slates, and it's society that stamps them with these labels, okay, that segregates them. Okay, so he is attacking those 18th century, late 18th century beliefs on racial inferiority. Okay, so what have we got in the poem then? We have so much imagery, and you want to highlight these in your poem as well. So the first bit of imagery is the idea of the sunbeams I want to talk about today. So according to Blake in this poem, the black boy has evidently borne more sun than the white child. Okay, so it's almost as if the little black boy has sort of loved God, or honoured God so strongly, so acutely, that he has received almost more sunbeams than the white child. So he's more receptive of God's love, right? He's more open to God's love than the white child. Okay, so in heaven it's actually the black boy who seems to be the noble, generous one as well, again seen to protect the white boy so he can bear the heat. So once again, the image of the sunbeams are, to be honest, sunbeams can be a good thing. It's the idea of God's love, right? And shows that the little black boy is so open to that, okay, which again makes you so outraged at how society treats him when he's just so holy, so innocent, so loving. Okay, so admirable. But it could also be, think about sunbeams. If you, it literally says the idea of being the heat, right, and the sunburnt face. Okay, I think that could also be negative in a different way as well, that he's been exposed more to the injustices. You could look at it like that too. Okay, because sunburn isn't really a good thing. But it could just be that he's had so much of God's love because he's been so open to it, right? And that's why he's burnt in a metaphorical way. So This whole poem, by the way, is an example of satire. Okay, satire is when you're poking fun at, you're trying to undermine by painting quite an extreme image. So he's definitely taking, the mick in a real strong way, right, about the approach of Christianity in his world. Okay, that actually the church just really helped to reinforce racial inequality as well, and it was another ill. Okay, I want you to hand over to you for a moment now, and there's some other key images. Okay, I've spoken to you about the sunbeams as the first key image. I want you to highlight where it says in the first part of the poem on line 5, my mother taught me underneath a tree. Okay, what does the tree symbolize here? What could it symbolize? Take a moment, pause the video. Okay, so thinking about the tree then, I thought this is really interesting. Since the boy here is learning his lesson about love and about having to put up with, the world's injustices, the tree for me always makes me think of things like the tree of knowledge, the Garden of Eden. And then because I think of Garden of Eden, I think of the fall, right? Being kicked out of Garden of Eden. So it's the fall from innocence into experience. So even though he's learning under a tree, it does remind me too much, unfortunately, of fallen versions of reality. Okay, that's the mother's version. It's a fallen version of reality where she accepts society's ills. Okay, so the mother comes from the world of experience, and unfortunately, she has accepted her lot. She has accepted the injustices and knows that she will only find respite in heaven, which she passes on to her child. So the tree is the tree of knowledge. So it's this site for education where she teaches her son the fallen version of reality. Okay, this experienced version of reality, to just accept your woes. What about the child? What does the child represent? This should be an easy one. You might want to pop this down with a little bullet point. Pause the video now. Okay, so obviously at the simplest of levels, the child always is always the embodiment of innocence, gentleness, and I'm just going to add there, of course, the creative imagination. Okay, now on the other side of the spectrum, children in Blake's work aren't allowed always to embody these qualities, right? Okay, it's more about the loss of these qualities. Think about your recent assessment. Okay, the loss of a happy natural life. So actually, what we have in the gospel accounts of Jesus's birth are a lot of references to human violence. Okay, a lot of references to the human violence that baby Jesus sort of received, and of course Jesus is a grown man as well. He died on the cross for humanity's sins. So even though the child is, definitely an image of the creative imagination and innocence, at the same level the child is also an image of exploitation. Both should spring to mind, and in this poem both exist as well. Okay, you've got anything you could highlight in that poem. You've got literal reference to, the little black boy in the title, the boy, the child. Okay, both are coexisting. Okay, the lamb, have a little think. What is the lamb representative of? Well, we know the lamb is the Lamb of God, and therefore Jesus. Okay, Jesus, unfortunately, and the lamb in the innocent poems, even though they're quite nice to take note of, they are also sacrificial victims, okay, subject to violence and treachery. So when in the poem, and this is on line 20, we get this idealistic image of being round a golden tent like lambs rejoice, we go, oh, like lambs rejoice? Okay, well, this vision is not reality. Okay, the lambs, the child, Jesus, all victims, all sacrificial figures. Okay, so even though this is a song of innocence, we get those shadows of experience coming through. Okay, I'm going to move past that one. I've done that one. So the whole way through, like a thread, there is running imagery of clouds, light, shade, sun, heat. Okay, and so what we have, because it runs the whole way through, is quite a persuasive argument, okay, that this sort of child is creating here. It's almost like he's trying to justify to himself you know, the exploitation he receives. Well, I must learn to, you know, accept God's love, and there'll be trials and tribulations, but then in heaven I'll be rewarded. You know, it's like the whole way through this, it has this persuasive rhetorical sort of way about it, using those motifs, those running images. And I've written on here that the child has this obedient absorption of the lesson, right? Because he uses the same imagery as his mother. He mirrors the imagery that she uses, so he's kind of won over by her argument, right? Okay, so again, that rhetorical power. So even though he has this quite powerful sort of rhetorical persuasive argument, it's quite an uncomplaining acceptance, isn't it, of everything that goes through. There's no negative sort of acknowledgement of his lot. Okay, he doesn't really judge his inferiority fully. Okay, you know, finally, the language is quite clear. It's the language of acceptance the whole way through, that he has to accept that white is the standard, and he has to assimilate to become like the white boy in order to be loved by him and then by God. Okay, so I've summed it up here, guys. Blake is exposing the limitations of innocence, the lack of awareness, the absolute innocence of the boy that make him vulnerable to injustice and exploitation. It's all here. Pause it if you need it. Okay, now structurally, what are we dealing with? We have quatrains. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now they are in iambic pentameter. So you go A, B, A, B. Okay, wild child, white light. So we have heroic quatrains, as it says there, with iambic pentameter. Now I keep saying all these fancy words to you. Why do we care? Because it's a very structured poem, right? Very structured indeed. So again, it follows his kind of naive acceptance. There's no going against the grain. There's no messy here. It's very neat. It's very clear. Okay. It's also interesting for me that we have a very even poem. When you look at it down the page, look at it, it's like a ruler. There's not really any lines that veer right the way out or right the way in. It's quite even on the page too. It reminds me of that one path and that blinkeredness. Okay, so there's more there if you want to write it down, but that's the key things I want to say for structure. And we end on this, because this is becoming a very long video. I've said a lot of stuff. Your mind's probably buzzing all over the place. Here's the big question. I want to end on this, that you are going to answer in your exercise books, okay? Because if you can answer this, you've got the poem, okay? So what is Blake attempting to teach us, the reader, right, about racial injustice in his contemporary world, in his world? Okay, so what is he teaching us about what it's like to be a black individual, a black child, no less, right, in his world, in late 18th century society? Okay, what is he telling us? So a paragraph in your exercise books, and just forewarning, year 12, that next lesson will be a much shorter video, but it will be on The Clod and the Pebble, one of the strangest little poems in the collection, okay, and one of my favourites because it's just so weird. I like it. Okay, have a great day. See you soon.